I know 50, I don't even really know him as 50 Cent, I know him as Boo Boo. I'm not even gonna call him 50. 50 was a street that basically said the street, but was still involved in the street.
I think 50 is as authentic as they come.
He's a bona fide street gangster.
He was one of the biggest, youngest drug dealers at that time. From 94, 95, he's one of the biggest, youngest drug dealers. At that time, he was like 19.
A long time ago, in the gritty streets of Queens, New York, there was a kid named Boo Boo. He wasn't just any kid, though. He was a tough, smart leader, Curtis Jackson, a.k.a. 50 Cent. He knew every corner, every alley, and every secret of his neighborhood. He ran with a crew of tough guys who looked up to him like he was their boss. Curtis was different. He had hustle, drive, and a fierce determination to make something out of nothing. He navigated the streets like a chessboard, always thinking several steps ahead of everyone else. But the streets weren't kind. Boo Boo faced danger and temptation daily. He made choices that shaped his path, some good, some bad. But Curtis wanted more than what the streets had to offer, which eventually led him to become the icon we know today. Let's dive in. Before 50 Cent became famous, his life was pretty dramatic. He wasn't born into fancy mansions or with silver spoons in his mouth. It was the exact opposite. Growing up in poverty, neglect, and being surrounded by drugs, 50 Cent faced more tragedy by the age of 8 than most people do in a lifetime. Losing his mom at a young age left a deep emotional scar, something he's been very open about. He once told Spin magazine, "After my mom passed, everything that went wrong because she wasn't there. If I wanted to go to the park and it would start drizzling, it was happening because my mom wasn't there." To cope, Curtis found refuge in his grandparents' basement. He admitted to Oprah Winfrey that he was trying to escape from dealing with people and his grief, unable to talk about it with anyone.
You become a bit insensitive. So just after...
Which one was it for you?
There was a point that I was afraid.
On top of losing his mom, 50 Cent grew up without knowing who his father was. The identity of his biological father remains a mystery, with 50 himself saying he has no interest in ever meeting the man. With all of this, Curtis found himself running with a tough crowd, the kind of guys who don't play by the rules. Curtis got into the street life, hustling, dealing, and trying to survive in a world that didn't cut him any breaks. He was just 12 when he started noticing something different about the world around him. He saw people making money on the streets, more money than he'd ever seen before, selling crack. It seemed like magic to him. Despite the moral complexity of his actions, he dismisses feelings of guilt or regret, viewing hustling as the only viable option in a harsh and unforgiving world. "It don't seem like one of the options. It seems like the only option," he says.
I mean, everybody around my way, so it's like, you had, 50, which we call him Boo Boo. Like, he jumped off the porch, I would say, at 12 years old.
Later in his life, 50 faced legal repercussions for his involvement in drug dealing. At one point, he was arrested for selling drugs and stopped hiding his activities, which led to trouble with the law. This pattern continued when, at the age of 19, he was arrested twice within 3 weeks for selling coke to an undercover officer. A firearm was also found in his possession.
He was one of the biggest, youngest drug dealers at that time. From 94, 95, he's one of the biggest, youngest drug dealers. At that time, he was like 19.
As a consequence, he was incarcerated, prompting a profound realization that it was time for him to make a change in his life. So, Boo Boo turned his sights to music. First off, he took on a new name, 50 Cent, a symbol of change and renewal. Then he started a group called G-Unit, with some friends from the neighborhood. They started small, grinding it out until Curtis stepped up and got them a record deal. They went mainstream and took the music world by storm. But success didn't mean smooth sailing. There were conflicts with other artists and within the group itself. Some members left, Tony Yayo went to prison, and 50 got into a conflict that almost ended his life. Starting with the infamous beef with Ja Rule. It all kicked off when 50's friend Troy robbed Ja Rule. Later, when 50 and Ja met at a club, 50 tried to clear the air, but Ja was convinced 50 was in on the robbery. Ja eventually confirmed the robbery, but denied ever seeing 50 with Troy.
But it had nothing to do with him. Like, I didn't even know you know this dude.
Enter Kenneth Supreme McGriff, a notorious drug kingpin who had shifted gears and was now involved with J. Rule and M. Inc. Supreme was a major player at the label, offering protection to its artists. When he asked 50 to stop messing with Ja, 50 agreed out of respect for Supreme, who he looked up to. However, 50 couldn't resist throwing shots at Ja in his song, Your Life's on the Line. Although he cut some lines dissing Ja as a studio gangster who needed Supreme's help to get his chain back, the beef was far from over. The real explosion happened when Ja and 50 performed at the same club and ended up in a brawl. 50 walked away with Ja Rule's chain, flaunting it in the music video for Life's on the Line. Ja, feeling humiliated, ran back to Supreme to get his chain back. This time, 50 managed to trade the chain for a watch.
I eat you for breakfast, a watch was a stain for your necklace, and your boss is a if he could, he would.
Supreme was getting fed up with 50 because he was messing up Ja's image, and this was the second time he had to step in to fix things for Ja. Determined to bring down M. Inc., 50's relationship with Supreme kept getting worse. To add fuel to the fire, 50 started hanging out with E. Moneybags, Big Nose Troy, and Green-Eyed Born, all of whom had beef with Supreme. Things reached a boiling point when 50 released the track Ghetto Quran, which leaked and made its way to Supreme. The song mentioned Supreme, and that didn't sit well with him at all.
Fear Prince and respect Supreme. For you slow mother, I'ma break it down illa. Supreme was the businessman and Prince was the.
Around this time, someone almost K-worded Supreme at a gas station, and he suspected 50 was behind it. Deciding to take out his enemies, Supreme put 50 at the top of his hit list. He hired Daryl Baum, aka Homo, who used to be Mike Tyson's bodyguard, to K50 for a hefty sum. On May 24, 2000, as 50 was leaving his grandmother's house with his son inside and his grandmother in the front yard, another car pulled up. An assailant walked up to the window and fired 9 shots from a 9mm pistol. 50 was hit in the hand, arm, hip, both legs, chest, and left cheek. A few inches higher, and he wouldn't have made it. Miraculously, after 3 weeks in the hospital and multiple surgeries, 50 pulled through. His survival became one of the most legendary stories in rap folklore. 3 years later, 50 released the track Many Men, revealing Homo as the shooter. By then, Homo was already dead, not by 50's doing or blessing.
In the Bible it says, what goes around comes around. Homo shot me, 3 weeks later he got shot down.
Meanwhile, Supreme McGriff was convicted of drug TR and M in New York federal court. Using testimony from a hitman, text messages, and video evidence, prosecutors proved that McGriff hired Kayers for $50,000. With all his and Gotti's assets seized, McGriff couldn't afford a lawyer and was given a court-appointed attorney. On April 9, 2007, McGriff was sentenced to life in prison. 50 Cent's mainstream success will come in 2002 when Eminem got his hands on his Guess Who's Back album through 50's attorney, who was working with Eminem's manager, Paul Rosenberg. Eminem was blown away and flew 50 out to Los Angeles to meet Dr. Dre. This was the start of something big. After signing a $1 million record deal, 50 dropped the mixtape No Mercy, No Fear, which featured the track Gangster. This song got even more attention when it was included on Eminem's 8 Mile soundtrack. At this point, 50 Cent was also signed by Violator Management and Shaw Money XL's Money Management Group. February 2003 saw the release of 50 Cent's debut album, Get Rich or Die Tryin'. It exploded onto the scene, debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200 and selling 872,000 copies in just the first 4 days. The lead single, In Day Club, set a Billboard record as the most listened-to song in radio history within a week. 50 was officially on top, but another infamous beef was brewing. This time it was with The Game. Dr. Dre, who had signed 50, decided to bring The Game into the fold. The idea was to have a strong West Coast presence in G Unit alongside their New York and Southern reps. The deal was sealed. and the game became part of G-Unit. But there was a catch. The game's manager was none other than Jimmy Henchman. From the get-go, Jimmy Henchman was jealous and resentful of 50 Cent, especially as 50's star kept rising. Leading up to the game's debut album, The Documentary, Henchman was whispering in the game's ear, telling him that beefing with 50 Cent could boost his fame even more. Henchman even admitted in an interview that the plan was for the game to surpass 50 in popularity. The feud officially kicked off in February 2005. Influenced by Henchman, the game launched an anti-G-Unit campaign, famously declaring it at Summer Jam 2005.
Y'all heard me do it, so make some motherfucking noise, man. Don't hate me, I ain't the motherfucking bad guy, man. And it's still 50. Now play my shit.
While 50 mostly stayed silent, the tension was palpable. Things came to a head when, on October 1st, 2005, the mixtape G-Unit Radio Part 14 Back to Business dropped. 50 finally addressed the situation on the track Emotional, where he aired his grievances about the game's betrayal and called out Jimmy Henchman for manipulating the game.
Hey, that's Jimmy, man. See, that's why I don't like them old school niggas, man. Now, you know Jimmy told him to do that.
This kicked the beef into high gear. Jimmy kept pushing the game to go after 50, and the game did just that, dropping multiple mixtapes and diss tracks aimed at 50 throughout 2005 and 2006. But things took a dangerous turn in 2007. In March, Jimmy Henchman's 14-year-old son was heading into the building where his father's office was. Tony Yayo and his associate, Lodi Mack, confronted the boy, with Yayo slapping him and Lodi Mack flashing a gun. The incident was caught on camera, leading to Yayo's arrest. Although the charges against Yayo were dismissed, Lodi Mack took the fall, claiming he was the one who hit the boy. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Tragically, just weeks after Lodi Mack was released from prison, he was shot dead in New York. This wasn't a random act of violence. Jimmy Henchman had put a hit out on him. And this was just the start of the chaos Henchman unleashed on Tony Yayo and 50 Cent. Henchman's first attempt to K50 was wild. He was driving down Manhattan's West Side Highway, gun in hand, ready to fire at 50's building. But he had to stop when he saw some cops tailing him. Undeterred, Jimmy got more creative. He planned to blow up 50's bulletproof van, figuring an explosion was the only way to get to him. Jimmy's vendetta didn't stop there. He orchestrated a drive-by shooting at Tony Yayo's mom's house with a silenced pistol. Jimmy's final attempt on Yayo's life was when he saw Yayo's Bentley parked and sprayed it with bullets. Luckily, Yayo was sitting inside his bulletproof van parked behind the Bentley, so he escaped unharmed.
You know, my issue was really more with Jimmy Henchman. And then, you know, as we leaving, I left Apollo. I'm around the corner, my Bentley got shot up, but luckily I was in my bulletproof truck behind the Bentley.
After all these close calls, 50 Cent decided to strike back. Knowing some of Henchman's goons were based in Atlanta, 50 found one of their addresses and started leaving threatening phone calls. He even had his own goons leave a dead rat on the guy's doorstep. 50 talked about this on the track Get the Message from the War Angel LP mixtape, where he called out Preemie and Jimmy.
I left a message by your door, you got a phone 44. Get the message, come out and get the message.
Eventually, Jimmy Henchman was arrested on charges of TFK, money laundering, witness tampering, and additional charges related to the death of Lodi Mack. On November 29, 2017, Jimmy Henchman was convicted and sentenced to 2 life sentences. In the end, 50 Cent managed to come out unscathed. All his enemies were either locked up or dead, while 50 went on to become one of the most successful artists of all time. He's sold over 30 million albums worldwide and won several awards, including a Grammy Award, a Primetime Emmy Award, 13 Billboard Music Awards, 6 World Music Awards, 3 American Music Awards, and 4 BET Awards.